After holding off the Pittsburgh Panthers on Wednesday evening, the Louisville men's basketball team turns around and hits the road as they travel to Tallahassee to take on the Florida State Seminoles Saturday evening at 8 o'clock on ESPNU. We'll talk about everything you need to know about that matchup and more on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time personally to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. The Louisville Cardinals will hit the road, as I mentioned, to take on the Florida State Seminoles. 8 o'clock tip-off on Saturday evening down in Tallahassee. The Cardinals are looking to snap a 4-game losing skid to the Seminoles, spanning back to 2018. Despite Florida State having started out very slow and stumbling out of the gate this season, I'm going to explain to you why the Noles are still a tough matchup for the Cardinals. And then in the second segment, we'll do some more of the same for what we do in our previews, players to watch, keys to the game, final prediction, everything like that. And then finally, in the last segment, we'll talk about the Louisville women's basketball huge victory over the Pittsburgh Panthers on Thursday evening, 81-39. We'll explain what all went right for the Cards in that one and do a little preview of the upcoming matchup down in Coral Gables against Miami, planned for over the weekend. Before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I serve as both a football beat writer and a recruiting analyst. Also do some PA announcer work for the university in various sports. You can check out my personal Twitter in the handle and the graphic at the bottom left-hand of your screen. And you can also check out the podcast Twitter pages at LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into the show. The Florida State Seminoles come into this matchup with a 7-5 record. Now, granted, this may not necessarily be as strong of a squad as Leonard Hamilton has had in the past X amount of years, but it is still posing a tough matchup for the Louisville Cardinals. We'll talk about what Florida State has done up until this point. Like I mentioned, 7-5, currently 9th in the ACC. They did have a COVID pause against Boston College. Started out the year losing by 16 to Florida. Had a 3-game losing streak in December at Purdue, a nearly 60-point loss. Lost to Syracuse and South Carolina by less than 3 points, respectively. And then what has got a lot of Louisville fans talking and it has a lot of optimism surrounding it is the fact that they lost to the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest by 22 points last week, a team that Louisville beat earlier in the season. The Seminoles have one win in the ACC right now. It is at NC State, 83-81. They are 1-1 in conference play. 1-2 conference play. They lost to Syracuse. So like I mentioned, they did have the Boston College game postponed. Florida State, despite having stumbled out of the gate, this isn't, they've replaced a lot from last year, replaced a top 4 pick in Scotty Barnes, and a handful of other guys that are, fighting for their respective chances in the NBA. Florida State has had to bring in some new faces. Caleb Mills, the transfer from Houston. Matthew Cleveland, a guy that Louisville recruited very heavily out of high school. He's a regular in that rotation. They do still have Malik Osborne, and we'll talk a little bit about Osborne in the second segment. But ultimately, this is a team that is still posing big questions for Louisville. As I mentioned in the opener, the Cards have not beaten the Florida State Seminoles since Chris Mack has been hired, and I think that is more so indicative of how, this upward trajectory that Florida State has been on in the past 4 to 5 years or so. Leonard Hamilton's MO in recruiting and on the recruiting trail is something that serves as Louisville's kryptonite. Leonard Hamilton recruits athletes with a ton of size and length, and that's something that Louisville has struggled with this, despite whoever the opposition may be. So even though Florida State may have, lost some games that they shouldn't have, or not played as good, and in certain games gotten embarrassed against Wake Forest, they still do match up well with the Cardinals. They have a ton of size. Caleb Mills is 6'5", Malik Osborne 6'9", Matthew Cleveland 6'6", 6'7". They have three guys play in their rotation that are above 7 feet tall. That's something that's kind of been a staple in Hamilton's rotation is having a guy or a couple guys like Chris Kamaji, for those who remember him the past couple of years. Yeah, he was a player that Louisville struggled to play against just due to that size. That's something that Louisville struggles with across the board is even when they have had athletes, it's been tough because Florida State, one thing that they've done extremely well is get guys that are very good two-way players. They play good defense. They get to the rim very well, and they really make life hell for you on the defensive end. So it's going to take a lot of discipline for Louisville. It's not a game where I think that the Cards have no chance in. Obviously, I will say that the Basketball Power Index has the Seminoles winning. I think it's like over 60% chance of winning the game. Now that can be kind of skewed. It doesn't really take context into full consideration and the whole big picture. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But Florida State is going to be a team. It's one of Louisville's toughest matchups year in, year out in the conference play. It's kind of turned into the Cardinals' kryptonite since 2018, which is the last time that the Cardinals defeated the Seminoles was back in the ACC tournament back in of that the 2018 calendar season. So ultimately, I have trouble in getting too optimistic about this game, despite what I would caution those listening or watching to think is the fact that, okay, and this is a syndrome that happens a lot, is that I call it the common opposition syndrome, because it's kind of like it's a fallacy, so to speak, because you look at one thing and say, okay, Louisville beat Wake Forest, Florida State got blown out by Wake Forest, therefore it means that Louisville should beat Florida State comfortably. That's not the case. You have to take matchups into consideration. Wake Forest does match up better with Florida State than they do Louisville. And, Louisville doesn't match up well with Florida State as they do Wake Forest. So I think that you have to, take things into consideration. Is this a winnable game for Louisville? Of course it is. It's not as daunting as it has been in years past. The Seminoles are still trying to figure some stuff out. But like I mentioned, whether it be Kentucky in basketball, Clemson in football, until Louisville shows that they can consistently win that matchup, I'll never truly feel overly optimistic about a certain team, no matter how down they are. Florida State, like I mentioned, has been on this kind of upward trajectory. Getting Scotty Barnes, getting the recruiting has taken a big step forward for Leonard Hamilton and company down in Tallahassee. So credit to him for getting the guys that fit his system. Now they may fizzle out in the tournament, because I feel like when it comes down to shooting the basketball, Florida State's not necessarily the greatest shooting team. And this year, they're respectable. I think they shoot it just a tad bit better than Louisville does on the season. But ultimately, a tough matchup for Louisville, despite stumbling out of the gate. The Florida State Seminoles are going to come ready to play on Saturday night. Louisville will have to do the same. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into the matchup, analyze it a little further, talk about the keys to the game, the players to watch, and then final prediction time in the second segment. Before we do that, I want to talk about our friends at GetUpside. Hey, Cardinal fans, this is your host, Dalton Pence, again, with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about, GetUpside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free GetUpside app in the App Store or Google Play and use the promo code SCORE and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. One good thing about it is the fact that you can save up to $200 to $300 a month in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right back to your account. You can cash out at any time to your bank account, PayPal, or any e-gift card for Amazon, etc. Just download the app for free, GetUpside, and use the promo code SCORE to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. Also want to take this time to talk about our friends at BetOnline. Excuse me. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. It remains your number one spot for all of the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year, and that means a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using the promo code LOCKEDON. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to fastest way to wager on all of your favorite sports, and BetOnline is where the game starts. As I mentioned, we are talking a little bit more in depth about the Louisville-Florida State matchup that is set to tip off just here in about 36 hours, really just depending on when you're listening to this. Just call it Saturday evening so it doesn't really get too confusing as much as it shouldn't be. Ultimately, Florida State, a tough matchup. We'll talk about the players to watch for both teams. There's going to be one of them because there's only so much time that we have. For Louisville, it's Sam Williamson. The rationale behind that, I think he played well against Pittsburgh on Wednesday evening, had 9 points, I think 5, 6, 7 rebounds. It was one of those numbers. I thought he played solid defense. The jump shot looked more confident, hit a couple mid-range. Hopefully that's the foundation that he can kind of rely on to start to, build a solid stretch of performances. And when I talk about why he's important in this matchup for Louisville, athletically speaking, Louisville kind of lacks that elite athleticism that they've been kind of looking for and that Florida State possesses. So for the Cardinals, I think that if there is an athlete that matches up well with Florida State, both in a size situation, strength, length, Sam Williamson with his 6'8" frame, very strong, gets to the rim. That's kind of his specialty, creating in the mid-range. I think he's going to be a key player to watch for the Cards in this one because there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the perimeter shooting. We'll talk about that here in just a second when we talk about keys to the game. But Sam Williamson is going to be relied upon a lot, both interior, rebounding the basketball, because that's one thing that Florida State has been successful against the Cardinals in the past couple seasons, has been out-rebounding the Cards. It's going to come down to everyone 1 through 5 rebounding. Sam Williamson, very good rebounder for his size. I like his possible impact on both ends of the court in this one. So Sam Williamson is the player to watch for in this one. For Florida State, it is Malik Osborne, second on the team in scoring, 11.9 points per game. He averages 7.3 rebounds per game, which leads the team. Shoots the ball 45%. He's got 51, 45, 82 shooting splits, which is very, very impressive. 6'9" senior, 225 pound from Madison, Illinois. He's been a guy that Louisville has kind of struggled to guard in years past. Knows the Cardinals very well, and a guy who is very, very tough interior-wise, but also can shoot the ball from deep if you give him the space, is going to be a matchup problem for the Cardinals. I'm very interested to see who Chris Mack goes to guard Malik Osborne. Is it Sam? Do you go? I don't think Malik Williams would be a good fit for Osborne. It's probably going to be Sam. You can maybe see, maybe Sidney Curry in a sense, just a bigger body guy that is pretty stout defensively. So for Louisville, it's Sam Williamson. For Florida State, it's Malik Osborne. If they're able to get him going, like I mentioned, and utilize and exploit that mismatch, it's going to be a tough time for the Cardinals to guard the remaining 4 players on the court. So definitely looking at Malik Osborne. The keys to the game for the Cardinals. Number 1, it's taking care of the basketball. We've seen throughout the season it's been, an uninviting trend that Louisville has not necessarily been as careful with the basketball. A lot of turnovers and have led to some big-time scoring droughts. Keeping taking care of the basketball does, 2 things. Number 1, Florida State is 12th in the country in steals per game. Very good defensively. They're very good on ball. The team defense, is very serviceable. So you have to take care of the basketball. Number 2, you're going to be relied upon to score some points in this one. I don't want to say, don't go 6-7 minutes of game time without scoring, but it goes without saying that has to happen. One of the causes that you result in this being a product is the fact that, they're becoming careless with the basketball. They're turning the ball over, wasting offensive possessions, and Florida State very, very good in transition with, those athletes. We talked about, Caleb Mills, Malik Osborne, Matthew Cleveland, etc. There's a ton of players on this team that can really, hurt you in transition. Anthony Polite, Cameron Fletcher, Raquan Evans. Evans was a guy last year that, really the Cardinals struggled to guard. And that's one of the keys to the game. It's taking care of the basketball, limiting the turnovers, which I think, goes hand in hand. It's a direct association with the scoring drought. So that's number one. Number two, the Cards have to shoot better perimeter, from the perimeter, shooting the ball from deep. Look, this is a lot of these you can kind of apply to any game, but in this one where it's going to be tough to, penetrate the defense and get into the lane and score around the rim due to Florida State's size and athleticism and good defense, it's going to be on Louisville to hit their shots from deep. You're going to have guys like Noah Locke, like Matt Cross, Mason Faulkner, L. Ellis, guys that shoot the ball very well or have the potential to shoot the ball very well. A lot of the responsibility is going to be on them to, number one, stretch the floor so it does open up the lane because you have to respect the deep shot, but also just being able to, get some offense going could be, could bode very well for the Cardinals in this one. Final prediction, I think Florida State wins this one. I think it's going to be within 10 points. I'd say probably about 6 points or so. I obviously don't think that this Florida State team is as good as it has been in years past by any stretch. Usually Florida State is flirting with top 15 rankings. This year they're 7-5. It's going to take a while for them to rise up the rankings. A lot is going to have to go their way. But until Louisville can show me that they can play good against Florida State, it's hard for me to be optimistic about the matchup. But not only that, it's also hard for me to predict Louisville to win this one. Do they have the potential to win this one? Well, of course they do. I think ultimately Louisville is one of the more talented teams in the ACC, and they still have the potential to finish in the top four. But as we mentioned, history and trends over the past handful of years have shown that Florida State and the Seminoles have been Louisville's kryptonite since Chris Mack has come to to rise as the head coach of Louisville. And like I said, that's not indicative of Mack or anything like that. That's more so just kind of showing how good the recruiting has gotten for Florida State. They're getting 5-star guys, premier athletes. Leonard Hamilton is the system that he's put into place. It is obviously working. So we will recap this matchup on Monday. Hopefully we are singing some good tunes of a victory. But before we get out of here for the weekend, I want to talk about the Louisville women's basketball. Huge victory over the Pittsburgh Panthers on Thursday evening, 81-39 at the KFC Center on Thursday. We'll talk about everything that went right for the Cards. After we talk about our friends at Built Bar, it's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. And I got to be honest, if yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, you need to include Built Bar in your plan. It's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better. It makes it easier to stick to your resolution. You want to eat healthy, but sometimes it gets boring. By like week 3, January 10th, 17th, you might be thinking, well, it's just kind of not worth it. Where's the chocolate? Well, Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. So you get the healthy benefits on top of just being purely delicious. Here's an idea for the new year. Go to your secret treat stashes at home, in the pantry, at the office, in the car, wherever. Throw out all the sugary or calorie-filled treats and replace them with Built Bars. So when you're craving a snack or treat, you can reach for something that's healthy and tastes incredible. Another thing that's great about Built Bars, there's so many different flavors to choose from. My favorite right now is salted caramel. There's mint brownie, coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cherry barcia, etc. Do yourself a favor. You don't want to miss out. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Once again, that's use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Final segment of the week is dedicated to a big win for the Louisville women's basketball team. 81-39 over the Pittsburgh Panthers on Thursday evening, and wow. What an overall performance it was for the Cardinals. Now, look, I know that Pittsburgh in their first 2 ACC matchups, both against ranked teams, NC State and Notre Dame, they got beat by give or take about 30 points. I predicted 20 to 25 point victory for the Cardinals in this one, but it was even more so lopsided and started that way ever since the first quarter. The Cardinals have had kind of the Achilles heel has been the start. The first quarter, the Cardinals raced out to a 19-8 lead after the first period and did not look back. One of the most staggering and alarming statistics for the Pitt Panthers out of all of the lackluster statistics: 35 turnovers for the Pittsburgh Panthers. Now, we came into the matchup, and I talked about it yesterday. This is a team that Louisville needs to force turnovers on because they turn the ball over, so much. It's a frequent phenomenon. But Louisville forced 35 turnovers in this one. Overall, Pittsburgh 2 for 9 from the three-point line, shot 26% from the field. Their leading scorer, Hayford, had 8 points. She was 2 for 7 from the line. Louisville, however, on the other hand, 40% from the field, 38% from deep, 17 for 18 from the free throw line. That's big. Even on the rebounding, 15 turnovers, so they need to cut that down just a little bit. 19 steals and 5 blocks for the Cardinals. When you look at the box score and what the Cardinals did, it was more so of a balanced attack, as it always is. 5 players double digits for the Cardinals. Olivia Cochran with 11, Emily Ingsler with 12, Haley Van Lith with 12, Chelsea Hall with 10. Peyton Verhulst also had 10, and I tweeted out just recently, Verhulst has been a player that struggled kind of early on, getting adjusted to the speed, and obviously the playing time may not have been there with the loaded rotation, but over the past, I'd say 3 or 4 weeks, she has been a player that has come in and really given good minutes. In this game, she had 10 points and 7 rebounds. And although her impact may not necessarily be showing a lot in the box score and being very evident, she's impacting almost all facets and aspects of the game with how well she plays. Jeff Walls over the summer in his Cardinal Sports on exclusive interview with myself, he said, she doesn't necessarily do one thing great, but she does everything else extremely good. Sorry about that. But ultimately, it was a big win for the Cards, and there's not much analysis to be done other than they clearly outmatched them on both the offensive and defensive side of things. So, great win for the Cards there. They turn their attention to the Miami Hurricanes. Miami is they just lost their first ACC game this past I was actually last night. They lost to the Wake Forest Demon Deacons 47-46, 7-4 on the year. They had a little bit of a COVID pause, so the 2 ACC matchups before this weren't able to be played. They're 7-4 on the season, like I mentioned. Not really any defining victories, but the losses are not necessarily bad. They did have one to Washington State. It was a 15-point loss. That's probably their worst loss to date. As I mentioned, Wake Forest by 1 point. Lost to Maryland 82-74, top 10, and then Indiana they lost 53-51. So 0-1 in the ACC, but still a pretty solid team. I don't think that Louisville's going to come in and blow the Hurricanes out. Instead, this is a matchup to where I think Louisville's probably going to win by about 8 points. Kelsey Marshall leads the way for the Hurricanes. She averages 14.5 points per game. You have followed that up with Carla. I'm going to butcher this name. Carla Aryevek. They do have 2 6'4" post players that they utilize quite a bit. Maeva Dejadi Tabdi. They also have Lola Pendande from Almeria, Spain. So they do have some size. They rebound about, their rebounding margin's about 5 more than their opposition on a nightly basis. Shooting the ball, they don't necessarily shoot the ball that well from deep, 28.6% on the season. And free throw shooting wise, they're decent, 64%. Not necessarily the 68%. So not necessarily the greatest, but when you look at what they bring to the table, it's going to just be one of those games where Louisville's going to just have to handle business. There's not necessarily one thing that Miami does or does not do that jumps off the page. They're a solid team. They're a team that could potentially end up getting into the NCAA tournament with a strong conference slate. But right now, this should be a game that Louisville wins. I'm interested to see how the Cardinals open up. There is a ton of momentum for Louisville. The key to the game for Louisville is to get out and transition. That is obviously going to be led by forcing turnovers, and something that Louisville has been very good at. One of the top 3 teams in the country in scoring defenses. So for Louisville, it's just a matter of using that size that Miami plays with to their disadvantage, and getting out in transition, using their speed, using their balanced approach. And I like Louisville's chances in this one, about a 6 to 8 point victory. I think that this is going to be a tough game in Coral Gables for the Cardinals. So we'll talk about that matchup as well as the men's basketball matchup on the Monday edition of the show. Before we get out of here, a couple quick shout-outs. First to the Cardinals Sports Zone podcast. The most recent episode dropped on the last Sunday. You can check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. And the Locked On Bets podcast, hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert analysis from Lee Sterling. Get that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. That's going to wrap up this week of episodes for the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day. Have a great weekend. Go Cards. Be safe. And we'll see you right back here on Monday.